Night Patrol is like a wild ride of a film, and I gotta say that the way you approach these cultures and this community of Los Angeles, it feels really special because you take the gritty aesthetics of like this locale and use them in such ways that are like extensions of these characters. What do you think you took away from like the history and culture of these communities to sort of help you form the initial idea of Night Patrol in the first place?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we knew early on as we were building the film that we wanted to, shoot LA for LA and really ingratiate ourselves like within those communities. That was super important to us, and have it be, part of that, and not like we were just sort of like, shooting in a studio somewhere, or where there's a tax incentive or whatever. So that was a really big part of designing the film, and marshaling resources where we had less days to shoot, but we had great crews in LA. We had the real locations, and we had the real people to kind of help pull everything off.
I love that. I love that so much. Was there like any specific like memory or like feedback that you got from like the community during production that sort of helped you bring to life what a specific scene would have looked like?
Yeah, I mean, early on, like as we've been putting the film together for a while, and trying to get it going. So early on, I was like going and like kind of getting taken around different, like in Watts or different communities, and meeting either like if it's gang members or community leaders or whoever it was, like kind of just to get a feel of like of what that world is, and then shooting parts of the script by them, or like saying like, oh, this is what we're doing, this is kind of thoughts here. So we were very early on, like kind of like pulling little nuggets from folks that were giving us some jewels. So that was really cool. And then we were able, uh, when we were in the like rehearsal and building process, like right before we shot, able to introduce a lot of our actors to like some of the folks in the community, to then like have them kind of get their questions answered. So it was really, from jump, it was very important of us to like just make all of that feel very lived in and real and authentic on both sides of it, on the police side as well. And then hopefully, that all supports when the supernatural stuff pops off, that feels very real world still as well, in a weird way.
Yeah, I think it worked because I think sort of the blend between like the realistic stuff and the supernatural stuff really comes together, especially with like the trippy psyche of Justin Long's character, which he experiences like continuously throughout the film. And
Yeah.
those visual aesthetics are like really interesting when we start digging deeper into them. So, what inspired you to take that approach in terms of sort of presenting that neural connectivity supernatural wise?
Yeah, it really was like, it was funny. It was like, and I don't feel I'm out of school talking about this because Justin's talked about it in other interviews, but he was like early on in the process, he was like, I call him a vampire traditionalist. He's like, okay, I'm gonna have fangs, and I'm gonna put in contact lenses, and it's gonna be like a thing. And I was like, no, but I do feel like we pulled like references of, yeah, like you said, like all of the mind control stuff, or like that inner, like the visual, like sort of language of mind control or interconnectivity, through from like Dracula and like other, like vampire lore of them being able to like cloud minds and do that sort of stuff. So like in a weird way, I do feel like we have made a traditional thing, but we just tried to push it further and make it feel like something you haven't seen, like the version of.
Mm. Speaking about like how you sort of approach sort of like the mythos and supernatural side, I had sort of a strong feeling that the Night Patrol group were obviously going to be the antagonists, but I didn't know that they would necessarily be spiritually connected like they do in the actual film. So
Mhm.
when you sort of also were envisioning like what these antagonists were going to be, what was the one thing that you knew that they had to be like all the time, like throughout the entire film?
Um, that's a cool question. Like, I mean, we talked, just in like doing screenwriting stuff, and then as we were building the characters with the actors, um, like what their backstory was. So a lot of that was just, you know, we always sort of used a like a shorthand of like, okay, if these are colonialists who are coming into some kind of indigenous land or dealing with some kind of indigenous force or earthen force around the world, and that's always kind of where like the vampire stuff starts from. So that was our yeah, like if there's like a overarching theme for the Night Patrol, it's this colonial force coming in and like wrecking shop, you know.
Yeah, and they wreck shop like hell, like especially with that huge climax. But in terms of like the people you've got in that group, you've got like Dermot Mulroney, you got Justin Long, and even CM Punk to like round out everyone. But even though they're like aligned with the same purpose, their characters don't necessarily see eye to eye. So how important was it for you to sort of build in that doubt throughout those characters while allowing them to sort of have their own influence on the events of what happens here?
Yeah, and that's a cool observation because it was like it was finding the balance of it where we don't want them to be mustache twirlers, like they all have their own motivations, but also at some point we had a cut that maybe went a little bit further into all of that. You sort of get lost in the sauce a little bit, so it was like finding that balance of like, okay, everyone's got their motivations. What are they clear? Even if they're at odds, we know kind of where they're at from moment to moment, and that escalates the drama and the action and the tension and everything. But we also didn't want that to get in the way of like our core story and our core characters that we care about and we're on the journey with. It was always there. I mean, technically, just to sort of support the main thrust of the story.
Mm. I absolutely just love how you also speak about on like the different sides of these like different communities because there's this huge spotlight on Night Patrol, but I also like how you handle these two different street communities finding common ground together past like the second act. How do you think
Mhm.
exploring the cultural and historical background of these communities guided your vision in creating that shared motivation that we see past the second act of this film?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like like this film and my previous film as well, Low Life, it like I guess if there's an uber theme of all this stuff, it is that like it's sort of realizing like who the true enemy is and like joining forces together to kick the hell out of them. So um I think even in that it's that thing of like are we really at odds? Are these certain gangs really at odds or community really at odds, or is there a bigger force obviously that's sort of uh, bearing down on them.
Hmm. Yeah, I wish that we got to see like some of these characters more together, but especially with like Jermaine and RJ's characters because
Yeah.
separately they really stand out. But outside of like the phone calling and that heated confrontation that they have, did you have any other plans to approach building that brotherhood before settling both of them on these paths?
Yeah, I mean, at the script stage, we had different, like, sort of iterations of, like, how they were interacting or if there were more or less or whatever. I think, like, ultimately, we found really strong actors who could kind of carry that bond and really sell that bond. And, it became like, like you're saying, like, almost you want that to happen. You want to see this more so than getting a chance to see it, and that kind of being a little bit of the tragedy of their relationship. So yeah, we talked about it, but ultimately, I feel like they were strong. Those two actors are incredible, and they were just so like charismatic. And I would love to make a movie of every one of the people in there, like their own thing or whatever. So um, yeah, that again is the fun of an ensemble, is that you kind of get what you need, and you hope for more, and you leave them wanting more.
Yeah, and I feel like with ensemble cast, you can really do like a lot in terms of like how you approach their sort of character arcs and the build up to that. Because I also didn't expect what would happen to Hawkins by the climax at all, because he's
Oh,
like
cool.
the bridging character for everything. So, did you have that all set in stone, or was there another idea that you had in mind about the build up to that scene?
Yeah, that was always there because it was just like the climax, just because that idea of brotherhood on both sides of it, of like the police brotherhood stuff, and then also yeah, literal family ties, and how Xavier was kind of torn between those two worlds and at odds with that. That was always a pretty early foundational sort of part of the story. But again, it was just like uh like Justin Long was able to kind of like somehow still make us be it root for him, or he's just so likable. Like, you know, like make I feel like there you can still sympathize with him, and he's doing horrible stuff throughout the film. And then and it's just a testament to him and his, I mean, his powers of acting are just a sight to behold.